Welcome, welcome, people of light, life, and the dark. Tonight, I'm going over the science of persecution. Let's get it started. But our discussion is going to go elsewhere as well. Hey, beautiful Anaya, welcome. Yeah, it's an open panel too. So let me get that started. Usually it gives me a hard time putting a thing in. Paste it in there. There's the link if anyone wants to come up and speak. But the science, I pretty much got into the science, but I didn't get the word persecution at that time. I couldn't really get that word. I was saying everything else but persecution. And of course, we know that, hold on, let me put this. Let me get this here. Okay, persecution. Hold on a second. Let me share that. Okay, well, basically, the definition of persecution is, of course, the hostility and ill treatment, especially because of a race or political or religious beliefs, or, just your ideologies or your thoughts on something. And it may be a world of difference than someone else's, and it may infringe in a way upon someone else. Okay? So, or at least that person may feel like it infringes upon them. So, they are going to persecute you because you're doing something that is not comfortable for them, or not. It's something, like I said, a world of difference than their thought process. And so what happens is, unknowingly, that person also persecutes themselves, because it's an energy in which, if I can't understand your perspective, or where you're at, and I'm not comfortable with it, I'm going to persecute you and not even think about, well, I got thoughts and ideologies that you may not, and other people may not be comfortable with either. So it's going to come back around eventually to me, because I should be able to, I should seriously be able to understand, or overstand. I want to overstand or understand it. The point that my ideology too is different, and that the other people might think, that it's not a comfortable thing. But usually it's a group. It's a group that have the same ideologies, and the person doesn't share those ideologies end up getting persecuted. But even still, it doesn't matter how many people, really. It still comes back around. It's almost like hypocrisy. It's like saying what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. So this is that it is definitely an electrified energy that makes its way back, just like a boomerang. Throw a boomerang in the air, and boomerangs come right back to you. So really, I want to talk about the witch hunts. I think that's interesting. Let's see if I got this open. Because that's a perfect example. Okay. Because okay. I'm gonna.
You know what's disturbing about the Salem witch trials? Quite a lot. They started in the spring of 1692 in Salem, Massachusetts. After two girls accused women of being witches, fear, paranoia, and hysteria snowballed into a societal nightmare. Many were brought before judges and sentenced to death with little to no evidence against them, except for the baseless testimony of others. Needless to say, things got out of hand, destroying lives, breaking apart families, and thrusting their little village into disarray. I'm Mike with List 25, and from what caused the Salem witch trials to how they ended, here are 25 disturbing facts about the Salem witch trials. 25. Confession. Under English law, the trials at Salem didn't work the way we think of trials today, with lawyers and strict rules about evidence. Often, these trials would be heavily weighed against the accused, and as such, many saw the writing on the wall and confessed. Surprisingly, those who confessed to witchcraft weren't executed, but the others who refused were. 24. Smallpox. Right before the witch trials took place, a smallpox outbreak spread through the town of Salem. This only added to the brewing hysteria. Eventually, Reverend Cotton Mather accused Martha Carey of starting it through witchcraft, calling her a rampant hag and queen of hell, though historical documents show she was merely independent-minded and unsubmissive. 23. Abigail Williams and Betty Paris. The brutal trials all started because of these two girls. The historical record states they began having terrible fits and would claim to see invisible spirits. When she was examined by the doctor and he claimed she was bewitched, the trials began, and little Williams started accusing many people, including Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. 22. Swimming test. During the trials, many tests were created to determine if someone was a witch or not. In this case, an accused person would have their finger tied to the opposite toe and lowered into a body of water. If they floated, they were a witch, but if they sank, well, then they weren't. The danger, of course, was drowning if they left the suspect in the water too long. 21. Witch cakes. Another test involved creating a basic cake out of rye flour and the cursed person's urine. They'd feed the cake to a dog, and if the dog showed the same symptoms, then witchcraft was proven. At that point, the dog would reveal the witch. Why a dog? Apparently, they believed dogs had a close association with the devil. 20. Touch test. With this test, it was believed while the inflicted person was having a fit, if the witch touched them, the fit would stop. So they'd have the accused touch those having fits to see if the fits would stop. As you might suspect, once the accused touched those inflicted, the fits would stop, and they'd point to the accused and call them a witch. 19. Witchcraft Act. These trials were mostly supported by a law passed by the United Kingdom's Parliament in 1542 called the Witchcraft Act, outlawing witchcraft and making it punishable by death. For hundreds of years, more witchcraft laws would be written. 18. Dog execution. Sadly, animals were not excused from the trials. Like I said before, dogs were suspect of potentially being linked with the devil, or being the devil himself. In one case, a girl accused a neighbor's dog of bewitching her. The villagers executed the dog with a firearm, but their priest, Cotton Mather, claimed the animal wasn't the devil because the devil wouldn't have died. 17. Pressed to death. The way they executed people during the trials was quite unusual. In one case, highly successful farmer Giles Corey was accused by 3 women of witchcraft. When convicted, the villagers put him on his back, placed a wooden board on him, and then gradually placed heavy stones on top, crushing him to death. This form of execution is called pressing. Corey's last words were, "More weight." 16. Torture. Torture to get a confession was also a common practice during the trials. Usually, it would lead to bizarre and fanatical confessions. In one case, while a slave named Tituba was being severely beaten, she cried out, "The devil came to me and bid me serve him." Afterwards, she talked about black dogs, red cats, and yellow birds, plus a white-haired man that made her sign the devil's book. 15. Rampant accusations. Of course, I've already discussed the first 2 girls who made accusations of witchcraft. This was merely the beginning. After a while, many accused others of witchcraft. Some took advantage of the hysteria to get back at rival families, while others honestly bought into it. Records show a total of 200 people were accused, and of those, 140 to 150 were arrested. 14. Ergot poisoning. One theory about what caused the trials is that many in the village suffered from ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that affects rye grain in warm and damp springs and summers, something very common in Salem. The symptoms of the poisoning are similar to what was described, including spasms, fits, hallucinations, delusions, and vomiting. 13. Land and homes removed. While torture and execution are certainly 2 of the scariest parts of the Salem witch trials, another act was just as terrifying for many people: land removal. Many of the accused were landowners, and in some cases, rather than killing them, the local government would take away their land. In a heavily agrarian society, not having land essentially thrust you into extreme poverty. 12. Door-to-door witch hunters. Eventually, rather than accusations made by others, the trials spawned real-life witch hunters going door-to-door and asking people to rat out their neighbors. Naturally, this only added fuel to the fire, scaring many people and causing them to accuse others of witchcraft as well. 11. The Devil's Mark. A common source of evidence against the accused was the Devil's Mark. It was believed the devil would make a pact with a witch by leaving a mark on their skin. Some believe these may have been lesions from a disease or a birthmark. 10. Mass hysteria. Back then, it's doubtful many of the villagers in Salem understood what was really happening. They were all suffering from mass hysteria, a social and psychological problem common in malnourished, poor, and stressed environments. Sadly, the hysteria in Salem only snowballed and lasted for a while rather than fizzling out after a short time, resulting in many casualties. 9. Martha Corey. not everyone bought into the validity of the trials. For example, this woman often spoke up against the examinations and tried to convince others to stop going to them. Unfortunately for her, this put a target on her back, and many pointed at her as a witch, thinking she was obstructing the trials. Oddly enough, when she stood trial for being a witch, even her husband testified against her. Who was her husband? Giles Corey, the man who later was also accused of being a witch and pressed to death. 8. Governor's wife. The governor of Salem let the trials continue for a full year until he caught wind that his own wife was accused of being a witch. After that, he put a swift end to the trials. 7. Gallows Hill and burials. The place many of the accused were hung and executed is called. For years, many speculated on its location. It wasn't confirmed to be at Proctor's Ledge until 2016. However, even more mysteriously, no one knows where many of the accused were buried, since they weren't allowed a Christian burial. 6. George Jacobs. Curiously, another form of evidence brought forward by accusers was spectral evidence. That's right, a testimony of people claiming witches appeared to them in spirit or ghost form. In George Jacobs' case, all the witnesses claimed he appeared to them as a ghost and beat them with a cane. Another story claimed Jacobs led a man to the water and tried to drown him there. Despite no concrete evidence, Jacobs was found guilty and executed. 5. Ipswich Jail. With so many people being accused of witchcraft, authorities had to put them somewhere. So many were placed in the local Ipswich Jail, which, as you can imagine, became very crowded fast. The conditions were awful. The prisoners were forced to do labor, and if they couldn't afford meals, they were only given bread and water. They were also kept in total isolation up until they eventually were executed. 4. George Burroughs. During the trials, pretty much no one was immune to the accusations of witchcraft, even ministers. This became especially true for George Burroughs, the first and only minister during the trials to be accused of witchcraft. He was sentenced to death, and because of the heat wave, was buried quickly in a shallow grave, with his chin and foot still sticking out of the ground. 3. Burned at the stake. While popular myth points to burning witches at the stake, no one was executed this way during the Salem witch trials. Though some were burned at the stake in Europe, hanging was the popular mode of execution in North America. 2. One of many. While the Salem witch trials are the most infamous in North American history, they weren't an isolated incident. Other witch trials took place in America at the time, and the practice was rampant in Europe before and after. 1. Total casualties. In total, 20 people were executed due to the trials. 19 of those people were hanged at Gallows Hill, and one, Giles Corey, was pressed to death. 4 other people died in prison while waiting for trial. The other hundreds of accused were pardoned, found not guilty, never indicted, evaded arrest, or escaped from jail. So, have you ever been to Salem? Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at List25. Enjoying our lists? Be sure to click that subscribe button on the bottom right and the notification bell so you don't miss out on new ones every Monday through Friday. Share them with friends and help us consistently conciliate curiosity. And if you want even more lists, check out these videos here or just head to our website at list25.com.
Okay. Hold on, let me.
Begged for his forgiveness.
So we see how back in the past, how persecution spread, and it ended up coming right back to that person that started persecuting people, and it came right back to them. And pretty much it was almost like witchcraft in itself. dealing with that energy, dealing with that. That's why I say emotions. Like these people's emotions were out of control. They were like, I really truly believe that they ate what they were eating was poisonous and caused them to not be in their right minds. This is just hilarious, the things they did. It's just foolish. So it wasn't something that if you were logical, you would really do. So definitely had to been poisoning to cause them to start persecuting or accusing others of weird stuff, you know. So that's an example of persecution, although it's a little different. But it all ends the same, pretty much. So my next topic is states' rights and the Constitution. Now, and also how I see states' rights as a good thing, but as Black people, I do not think it has anything to do with us. And the only thing it has to do with us is we've always been the ones who have been stuck in between the two different groups. And we've been utilized. We've been utilized. They have to have something in between, and that's what we've been utilized for. So we are being used like for the Constitution as well. I'm going to explain in detail how, but before I get into that, the obvious to why we've been stuck in the middle and used as a tool. Although I don't think, because when we look at 1919, I think that's when we had our own businesses and we were the Republican Party. Okay, let me look at that. I think it's 1920. Okay. Party realignment and the New Deal, the realignment of Black voters from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party that began in the late 1920s proliferated during this era. And this process involved push and pull. The refusal by Republicans to pursue civil rights alienated many Black voters. But I don't think it was the 1920s. It had to have been let me see when that was. I shouldn't have said that, but I can see when. Okay, what year was that? To be sure. And this is when we started seeing all the lynchings and stuff going on. Okay. All of the first blacks in Congress were Republicans. Currier and Ives print. The first colored senator and representatives were December the 31st, 1871. Meet the first black members of the United States Congress, U.S. Senator Hiram Revels. 1827 to 1901 from Mississippi, was the first African American to serve in the United States Congress. But so that was 1871. Wait, so basically, we were put in our condition, and the condition wasn't necessarily the poor Caucasians that were doing anything until it was put into their minds that we were a threat. Then they were moved by the forces to be at that time to deal with, I guess, the situation for the rich, basically, is what they did it for. They ended up playing in the hands of the wealthy. And I think it's a way of control as well, using us as a way of control. Not just control impressed upon us, but also to control the poor Caucasians. So we were stuck in the middle to have them deal with the poor whites. So that's why I say, when this Constitution was made, it protects the poor whites. It protects not just the poor whites, it protects the people, right? So but the wealthy, not all wealthy, but it seems to be that the ones with a different ideology, that it's kind of would, I don't know how to explain it. I guess of greed, I could say, could take advantage of the situations, and plot things out differently against, just because of capitalism. I'm leaving out capitalism. It's a big part of it. So capitalism plays a big part in that. They always capitalized off of a body, off of us mainly. And then so when you no longer have that, you have to find a way. So you have to feed off of the bottom people. So we kind of have been like a foundation and also a control mechanism to control the masses. Our situation, our issues, people have become rich off of our struggles, off of our backs. we have pretty much been used and continue to get used. And we're put in as if we are included, but we know we're not included. I forgot, I had an instructor who had us think about a statement that was said by, I think, one of the presidents. I don't know whether it was Lincoln, but it was something in the Constitution, I think. And it left it open-ended. Like, did it include Black people or not? So everything was open. So we can say it can include us, but the whole facts of everything, it doesn't include us, because it doesn't really include us. We're just being used. We've always been used. To basically, and then, so now it's at the point where we see both getting used, the poor whites and the Blacks were getting used, both. And not even that, other groups that come over are being used as well now. It's just that distinction, that division. But thinking that you can bring people together as one, but at the same time, there's so much turmoil involved, so much unfairness, so much unbalance involved, and a whole bunch of overlooking as well. So when we think about states' rights, this is why there is that fear. Let me actually share my screen. So this is why there is that fear of states' rights amongst people who should not have fear of the states' rights. We should be for states' rights. Now, one good thing I saw him do was he turned around, Trump, and he left the pandemic up to the states to deal with, right? Which was a good thing. It was a good thing. But either way, because we're, as Black people, it's open. The Constitution is open. People have been pulling us in and including us, but are we really truly included? You see, to me, it seems like we have some unfinished things that we're not really facing or dealing with this Constitution, and with being that we're what do we have? We have nothing. So being that we've had so much taken away and an advantage taken of us as a people, and we're not included in a Caucasian thing, but we've been utilized as we've been used as a means to ends for the Caucasian community for their whole existence. And so when we look at that, then yes, there is a lot that needs to be done for us. We're not included in anything. In all actuality, because we don't need paperwork to tell us what our rights are. We know our rights. Our rights are God-given rights. You know. And by God, I mean the God within us, you know. Our free rights, what we came on the earth with. And that's with everything, with a lot. So not needing necessarily or not even having a document, it's we're not even, I don't even think, the only thing that ties us, and it shouldn't really tie us to anything, is pretty much, I mean, this is why there's difficulties with state rights, which is state rights is something that a government by the people, for the people, of the people really, really needs, because it's saying that the people govern themselves. And we definitely are people that need to govern ourselves as Black people. But because this system and has been allowed to flourish, and it flourished, you know, everybody knows, off of our backs. And that's why I say it's important for us to see the benefits of states' rights when we don't look at it in the form that it's been presented in. The form such as, let me share this. Okay, I found it. Okay. So, states' rights can be good as they restrict the power of the federal government from becoming too strong and resulting in a dictatorship. However, state rights have been used against Blacks. And you know, this is evidence right here I'm showing you. Because it hasn't really been used against Blacks. It's been made to be used against Blacks because of the circumstances of the time. This has been going on so long, pitting groups against groups, and a capitalist system, okay? So it's been made to seem like it's against Blacks. by moving those whites to want to enact very uncomfortable things against the blacks, just like we were pushed to immigrate. We were moved to immigrate. They intentionally made our lives hard so that we wouldn't be able to thrive separately anymore. That's all intention. And then they integrated us, forced us to have no choice but to look forward towards coming back to the plantation amongst, Of course, you couldn't have what we see now without doing that, putting the people together, propaganda to bring foreigners over to America, turn it into a country of immigrants, the melting pot. Women's abortion rights and other groups like gays by states that do not want to comply with the U.S. Constitution. But I say that definitely, because Black people would never deal with abortion. We would have never dealt with abortion until it was introduced. And it was introduced to us as a form of genocide. And we accepted it because we did not know that it was a form of genocide. Intentionally brought to us. And then the gay stuff, also once again given to our society. We didn't have these issues. We didn't have a need for that. The gays and the killing of the babies, and we didn't have anything really against us until greed stepped in and saw that it's better to integrate people that don't hate each other, that really can't deal with each other, together. And this is how we were used. We were used and made to be like a threat to the poor whites. And we've been used ever since. But we don't know that. We can't see that because we normalized everything. We normalized our own struggles that people are making money off of. Alan Sharpton, radio stations. Many, many people are making money off of our struggles. And they got to keep us in those struggles because it makes money. It's capitalism. It's capitalism. Capitalizing. So states' rights in these days and times, because things have changed and things are different, is very, very critical to have rather than a big government. But Dems have pushed big government programs because we have been stuck in our situations, in our circumstances as Black people. So that's been an advantage to them, to those who want big government. They benefit off of, that's another way that they benefit. Is to keep us needing special programs and different things like this. So there's those who want big governments, and now they want globalism as well. And not to forget all the isms they put in to our lives, causing us to have mental, psychological uh, brokenness, and just the whole American people as a whole. We have a lot of isms we deal with. And that's by design, by, by the hand. So that's what makes, once you get rid of certain isms, then you can have a successful states' rights, I think. States' rights. Once you can get rid of, because either that or you live in a big government dictatorship and living with, and still dealing with isms and trying to figure out, because they're not gonna, that's what they're trying to do now, is get rid of all this marching, all this, the people being upset, not liking things, not being happy. The people not happy, we're pressuring them to make moves. They're cutting out all of that. So all we really have is our states' rights. When we want to cut out the big government. But we have to get the negatives out of it. You have to take the negatives out of it. That have been put into this idea of states' rights, by the people, of the people, for the people. And once you can get rid of that, then the people as a whole hold the power. But as long as you have those instigators and those agitators, and you will have war, you will have conflict. So that's okay. I was going to also talk about, because down here it says that's states' rights in a nutshell to me, and that's what I see the hand use. They're playing it to their own tune of how they want to move people, getting you to move, controlling your emotions. Almost like it is witchcraft, because especially if you weaken, you lend over your emotions. You allow your emotions to be controlled. And our emotions, we are supposed to control them. It's supposed to work for us and benefit us. So why are states' rights important? States' rights are vital to checking the federal government's power, testing new ideas, and ensuring that citizens can better have their voices represented in government. This is American federalism, and it is a beautiful construction. Okay. Now, why is a strong national government necessary? They contend that a strong national government is necessary to ensure that the states respect the rights guaranteed to all citizens in the national constitution states. Rights advocates also address issues related to environmental protection and education. Because of this, states need to focus. Why do we need constitutional rights? Okay, because of this, states need to focus on protecting their power from federal encroachment, not individual liberty. The constitutional rights of states are essential in creating an efficient, effective government that preserves individual liberty. I suspect that the true answer that most people will give will depend on the issue. Are state rights a good thing? State rights can be good as they restrict the power of the federal government from becoming too strong, resulting in a dictatorship. However, the state rights have been used against Blacks, women's abortion rights, and other groups, gays, by states that do not want to comply with the U.S. Constitution. So that's the states' rights, and that's how we are being used. We're being used to go against, because we too need rights. We've been included, but were we really included? I question, is it really legal that we're under somebody else's system? I would say no, it's not. It never was. We should have never been forced to be in a situation because it's not our world. Okay? Two different worlds. And in order for those worlds needed to come together for the benefit of capitalism and to be moved and controlled in a way that would never benefit us, but would benefit only the hand that is making those moves. So you get rid of the hand, the wicked hand that's making the moves, you have a really good system. And get rid of the isms, all those isms, and you know, encroaching upon others, ideologies, and because people should have the free will to choose what they want to think or how they want to be, So whatever, you know, whatever makes them, you know, it puts them on their path, you know. So it's not a forced anything forced. You know, like now, some things are forced upon us in a way. Or it's getting worse to where they want to enforce things and control the American people. So that's states' rights in a nutshell. What else did I want to talk about tonight? Oh, I could show y'all some videos. But what did I do with that? Ooh. Let me get over here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Oh, the story's speaking. Okay, I'm gonna share videos, a couple videos real quickly. I'm definitely gonna share High Frequency Radio's video where he was talking about hypocrisy. Let me share that one first. Oh, let me see. Let me see here. See, I just got to, let me do it like this. It might be better. Okay, hold on. Got it. Okay, here we go. It's called
Why there aren't uprisings all over the country.
Yeah.
Maybe there.
So basically, this is one side that was screaming a lot of different inciting violence comments. And this to me is, it's like I would definitely spring this video upon them and show them what they have done in the past to incite violence as well, especially this past summer, right? So this is that video under hypocrites and traitors, but I had did a link of it in my comments. I mean, in my description. So in case anybody wants to share it. But let's go on and get into this video here. Let me get it real quick here. that it? Where's it? Okay, right there. Okay. Let me share this. Okay, there we go.
Why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
Biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look, as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
There you go. Hold on. All right, here's the next video. Where is my, okay, I'm in my history, but, oh, I know where I want to go to. Back to the other thing. Oh, this one. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna play this one first, I think. Yeah, this one's the juicy one. Hold on.
Now, this brother started with us, what?
Yeah.
Okay, I got that. This is the juicy one. Okay, let's play it.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's just a small part of it. I had seen that 2 weeks ago. And what she's talking about is there's a person who is telling the world what Italy's role was using satellite, Italian government satellite.
Leonardo.
Yeah, I was hunting for Leonardo da Vinci. But the Leonardo, and they were changing votes, but there were many countries that were doing that, but it had to be controlled from China using hammer and scorecard, in my opinion, because you couldn't have so many different attacks, because you'd be changing numbers in all the 50 states that just wouldn't match up. That has to be synchronized, and they all do it like it was late at night in Georgia, 11:30, but the president uses this case in point. You hear him giving his speech. This is in Michigan. At 0631, there were, and it's like 142,722 votes changed to Biden. Now, the first time I heard him give that speech, I said, anyone that says 0631 on 4 November, wasn't 0630, wasn't about 6, it was 0631, and it was 142,722, whatever it is, I can't remember the exact number, but it means the president has that data. Now he has all of this data, and how he's going to get it to the American people. Ann and I were talking to someone that's going to do more of what was just done in Italy, but show you the magnitude of it. Because we have watched it in real time, how that has changed. And the data is there, I've got it on my iPhone, it can tell you. So where people are saying there's no evidence, they're the same people that when someone was taking a picture down in Georgia, you remember, and they pull the cases from underneath the table, and you say, well, there's the evidence. Well, they say, well, you can't prove that. Look, this is a scorecard from Joseph Goebbels. If you tell a lie big enough, and that's what they're doing. And you see Pelosi, you see Schumer. Ann just told me that Pelosi called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and they're trying to get him out on the 25th Amendment or to impeach him. Why? Well, because on Wednesday, they took Pelosi's laptop. She's frantic. There were some people in there that were special forces mixed with Antifa, and they took her laptop and they have that data. So you'd say, well, look, you only got 12 days or whatever it is till the 20th. Why worry about it? Just let them go out. No, they're terrified because they have that data. I believe they also have a source that is talking like a songbird. And the president is going to spring that person on us, so it will completely change, because it is someone that has said, I'm not going to do this. This is treason. Remember, this is treason, high treason.
Sir, could he use the emergency broadcast system or emergency action message to
did you see yesterday that an email went around telling everybody about the emergency broadcast system? So there are those little signals that you see. You see that what I saw was the September 18th or 19th executive order 2018, that if foreigners were involved in the U.S. election, the president could declare an emergency. That means he knew back 2 years ago. And that's why it's just all come together that COVID-19 was a biological attack. Let's not say it was an accident and it slipped out of a food market or anything. We're not that naive anymore. It's standard. Simultaneously, remember, when was the impeachment?
Same time.
December and January, when COVID-19 was coming in. So they had that deception. The media is just like now. You look at the media and all they're doing is talking about Wednesday. So something's going on.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction.
That's all.
Military terms, it's a tactical deception.
And they allowed Congress and gave them an excuse not to give the delay, because they said, oh, well, now these people are violent. So it was also used for that purpose.
So that's how they played that. And they knew it. And all I can say is, we must stand up. You are just like a young soldier, at Normandy or the Battle of the Bulge, this is a critical time for the world, because if America goes down, my wife is ill, and so it was interesting. This morning, the night nurse, I've got 24/7 nurse care, so that's why I'm here. The night nurse said, "This is why we came here." She came from Haiti.
Wow.
She said, "This is what we tell her." She's got twins, a boy and a girl, 12 children. And she said, "My husband and I tell them this is why we came here, for freedom." She understands it. So, yes.
We have church networks across the country. What would be certain points that we need to communicate to all our church networks around the country?
Well, I was on with Carla Dean last night, and there were like 625 civic leaders. And that's the question they asked me. And I think what we need to communicate is back the president, tell him how serious this is. This isn't just a fraudulent election. It is changing our whole lifestyle. It's engineered. It's coordinated. The COVID-19, it has to be. Look at this. And what's going on, and we think it's because of medical. Dr. Fauci tells us, well, we've got to shut everything down. Look at what they've done to the world. And look at the Republicans, the depth of this corruption. I had a call from a chap who was a congressman in Georgia, and he called me. He's trying to get General Flynn's because he's talking about corruption in other areas, what they've done. As I said, it's just yesterday that I found out that Comey sold the hammer and scorecard system to the Chinese. So we got a problem. Now, I happened to see this 4 years ago because I was the air attaché in London, and I was a vice commander at the 111 Wing in England. And then I was a commander of the 3rd Air Force when we attacked Tripoli in 1986, Gaddafi. I know the GCHQ, which is the Government Communications Headquarters, which is our equivalent of Fort Meade, NSA, Signals Intelligence. And what is important about it, when it started, the Russian collusion, I saw how the information was coming out of the United Kingdom. They were falsifying it, creating all this, so-and-so said he's Russian. Well, that's the Saul Alinsky model. They were doing what they were accusing President Trump of doing what they were doing. Hillary paid him. So if you see the corruptness that's going on, and it's been how many years it's been going on, why did President Obama move to Kalorama, less than 3 miles here by the crow flies, have Valerie Jarrett move in with them, with her husband, and put a skiff in his home because of the Signals Intelligence? Now that's the danger. So in answer, you asked the right question. I don't know exactly what we need to do, except we must understand that this is pervasive. It has cut through our whole society. Every senator and House member of the Democrats know that Biden was elected unconstitutionally. I mean, is that the model for the future? Stay in your basement, have one rally with 14 people in a car blowing their horns? Please, it doesn't pass the sniff test. Wake up, America. That's what we've got to tell our neighbors. That's what we've got to tell our church group. And the people that say, well, there's no evidence. There's tons of evidence. Look for it. But how much has Fox News gone out? And I just started the 1st of November, a single person. I don't have people helping me, except Ann and these types, we're on the air. But the fact is, they have not investigated when they say the data isn't real. There isn't evidence. What have they done to investigate it? The what?
Nancy Pelosi's laptop. Is it with FBI today?
I wouldn't give it to the FBI.
Yeah, right.
It's somewhere else. Ann's got pictures of it.
Okay.
And I thought that was counter information operations on us. But no, Ann, I've seen the laptop our special forces took out. That's why she's so frantic. Think about it. You only got, 12 days? The 20th day's the 8th? 12 days. Now let them go out. But they're calling, she calls the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The vice president misses the opportunity. And unfortunately, I believe the vice president's committed treason. Now, never would I have thought in these halls, after walking through the White House, and when my last job in the Air Force, I was the number 3 man in the Air Force and the Air Staff. And I also did Vice President Gore's Reinventing Government. So I would go to the White House every 2 weeks with the whole federal government. I was the one person that represented the Department of Defense for Vice President Gore's Reinventing Government. I never would have thought what has transpired since that time frame. And so tell everybody, wake up, America. This is serious stuff. We're thinking what those soldiers that went across the Delaware in 1776 with George Washington, that's where you are now. That's where we are. Are we going to stand up for that?
That's why.
Yeah. Well, I've got to run, but God bless you.
In an exclusive interview with the Epoch Times American thought leaders, Mike Pompeo says President Trump helped change the world's view of the Chinese Communist Party, and there's no going back.
For years, Chinese dissidents have been sounding alarm bells in the U.S. and around the world about the Chinese Communist Party, its grave human rights violations, and the nature of the regime.
We looked past them. We had other challenges. We were involved in a very serious counterterrorism campaign, appropriately so.
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to start that video. Let's go here. Back to my... Got more videos.
Yeah,
okay.
that's true.
So, let me turn this off here.
Yeah,
Let's turn it off. Okay, there we go. What did I want to share? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm playing this next one. This is Mike Pompeo.
And we took our eye off this enormous threat. And now it's now upon us. It's now inside the gates. The Chinese Communist Party is here in America.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told the Epoch Times' Yanya Kellick that the CCP's influence is now inside the American government, research institutions, and schools.
For a long time, America's leaders denied that this was taking place. So I think people couldn't see it or feel it, or their leaders were telling them, no, it's okay if they steal millions of jobs from people in Kansas or Iowa or, who invented something, or they steal some technology invented in the Silicon Valley or in the Boston corridor. American leaders said, that's okay, we're going to go make a pretty penny. Don't worry.
He said President Donald Trump understood the failure of the 50 years engagement policy from the outset. His administration fundamentally changed the American stance on China.
And the Trump administration has begun in every dimension to turn the ship in the right direction to get America to once again do the right thing and protect itself from this communist threat in China.
Before being elected, Trump's TV career often featured comments on China.
I said that China is taking advantage and abusing us. They are taking tremendous numbers of our jobs. They're making our products. We are rebuilding China.
He has described the Trump administration's China policy as distrust and verify, compared to Ronald Reagan's Soviet Union policy of trust but verify.
Every experience I've had in my 6 years as a member of Congress and now 4 years serving in the Trump administration would suggest that anything but distrusting anything that comes from the Chinese Communist Party is falling.
And distracted with
They've broken promise after promise after promise, not just promises to the United States, promises to the world, promises to the people of Hong Kong, promises to their own people in mainland China, a promise to President Obama that says they wouldn't militarize the South China Sea. Time after time after time. The Chinese Communist Party promises that if they have a virus problem that they'll disclose it. And the list is endless. They still, to this day, haven't allowed the World Health Organization to begin its investigation of where this virus emanated from. And yet they promised they would.
He said there is no going back to the past China policies.
President Trump recognized that when he began his campaign, and then when he took office, we've now changed fundamentally how I think the West looks at China, not just the United States. Even when you look at Europe and Australia and Southeast Asia, they know too. They know that the Chinese Communist Party is up to no good, and they see it. They see it plainly, and so I'm confident that this pressure that is now on the Chinese Communist Party is real, and not just because leaders are demanding it, because people all across the world can see it. The true face of the Chinese Communist Party has been exposed.
Americans' distrust of mass media has reached a record high. 33% of those polled by Gallup saying they have no confidence at all in the media. And that's in contrast to Democrats' increasing levels of trust in the media. Gallup reports that Republican confidence in the media has plummeted, while Democratic Party supporters' trust in the media has risen dramatically. Democrats' trust over the preceding 4 years has been among the highest Gallup has measured for any party in the past 2 decades. The partisan divide over the reliability of the media swelled to a record 63 points. A mere 10% of Republicans surveyed said they had a great deal or fair amount of trust in the media, compared to 73% of Democrats. The massive gap between supporters of the two parties is the largest Gallup has recorded since it started asking respondents the question in the 1970s. It survived the Great Fire of London in 1666 and the bombings of World War I and World War II. Let's take a closer look at one of the oldest churches in London. Our UK...
Okay, that's that one.
If the election goes to Biden, there's a good chance that the Democrats will then control all the 2 branches of Congress and the White House. And considering the kinds of things that they're proposing, that could well be the point of no return for this country.
We should stop rewarding wealth and start rewarding work a little bit. Let's raise the capital gains tax for people making over $1 million a year to ordinary income. Let's reverse the Trump tax cut.
Those of the left often act as if human beings are just like inert blocks of wood, or like chess pieces that you can move around on the chessboard to put wherever you want to carry out some grand design. But of course, people react to these things. In the early 20s, the tax rate on the top income was 73%. And the people making over $100,000 paid something like 30% of all taxes. By the end of the decade, the tax rate on the top had been cut to 24%. People making over $100,000 now paid 65% of all taxes. And the reason is quite simple, that when you have the tax rate at 73%, people simply don't pay it. They put their money into tax-exempt securities and arrange their financial affairs. So what we're really talking about is, do you want a symbolic high tax rate on the high-income people to win votes politically, which the rich themselves are not going to pay? Or do you really want more tax revenue coming into the government?
So to gun owners out there who say, well, a Biden administration means they're going to come for my guns.
Bingo. You're right if you have an assault weapon. The fact of the matter is they should be illegal, period. 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. More than all the wars, including Vietnam, from that point on. carnage on our street. And I want to tell you, if I'm elected and I'm coming for you and gun manufacturers, I'm going to take you on and I'm going to beat you. I'm the only one who's done it.
Obviously, right now, I'm sure you're well aware of the gun debate going on in the country, and you've weighed in on this before. At what point do we say, okay, here is a clear-cut case where, correlation to causation here? We can look at this graph and determine it. One to me that stands out, we've been talking about this quite a bit with the gun debate, 98% of public mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. Seems to me that's pretty cut and dry, one that's never talked about. In your opinion, when does it cross that barrier where, okay, we can definitively say this is the reason?
Well, I think for gun control people, it will never cross that barrier because they will never discuss it in those terms. When did you ever see any gun control advocate come up with numbers to show that gun control reduces murders? There's a huge volume of evidence out there. Think of it. There are 50 states, each having all kinds of different gun laws. There are all kinds of ways they could be compared. Think of all the countries around the world with different gun laws, different periods of history when there were different gun laws. And so you have a mountain of evidence if you were looking for evidence. Instead, they just simply assume from day one that if you have tighter gun laws, you'll have less murder rates. And there's tons of empirical evidence pointing just in the opposite direction.
I almost single-handedly made sure that Robert Bork did not get on the court because he did not think there should be enumerated rights.
This may be the most important Supreme Court nomination of our time, not simply because Judge Bork is the most highly qualified nominee of this generation, but because this is an historic crossroads as regards the expanding power of judges, which is to say, the erosion of people's rights to govern themselves democratically.
Why did you testify there, and what impact did the rejection of Robert Bork have on the rest of the judiciary over the years?
I testified because of the gross distortions that were coming out. I was listening to the congressional hearings during the day, and I'd hear how Bork was, at the very least, racially insensitive, or actually opposed to civil rights and so forth. And then I would go to the Stanford Law Library and check out Judge Bork's record and his record before he became a judge. And I discovered in those files amicus curiae papers filed by Judge Bork repeatedly on the side of Black civil rights organization. I learned that no civil rights advocate had ever lost a case in Judge Bork's court. And I was already familiar with Bork's record before I even looked into the law, because I was teaching economics, and I often read things that he wrote about antitrust law, which were brilliant things. And so an enormously intelligent man, an enormously decent man, and all sorts of other filth was brought up. One being, for example, that he worked for big corporations, you see, because money was more important to him. And Bork was an academic, which is not a big bucks enterprise to get rich quick, and a government official, of which the same could be said. And at the particular time he went to work at a high salary in business, his wife was dying of cancer, and he wanted to have the money to make her last days as comfortable as he possibly could. And for that to be turned into some kind of cheap political charge was just truly despicable. More than that, the difference of one man on a Supreme Court that's divided is enormous. And every time I read an opinion by Justice Anthony Kennedy that is wishy-washy and incoherent in some cases, I think that's the price of defeating Judge Bork.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. Come on. Take a look at the record. If I'm president, Betsy DeVos's whole notion from charter schools to this are gone. No privately funded charter school would receive, or private charter school receive, a penny of federal money. None.
One of the classic examples to me of few things that are going very well in the ghettos across the country, and that's some of the charter schools that have come in, where the public schools, the kids are just wiped out. I mean, the kids in those ghetto schools often are 2 or 3 years behind the national norms and all kinds of stuff. But in some of these ghetto schools, especially those run by the KIPP organization or by the Success
charter
Academy,
schools.
I'm sorry, yes, charter schools in the ghetto.
Right.
Their kids are scoring at levels equal to, and in some cases better than, that in affluent suburbs where the kids come from families making $200 grand a year. And you would think, my God, this is something that ought to get a lot of attention. The welfare state supporters are fighting against charter schools. The NAACP is fighting against charter schools. The teachers' unions give a lot of money to politicians. They give money to the NAACP. They want a control of the schools because the schools are a source of jobs. Whether or not the kids learn anything is not their concern. I think it's the most cynical thing you can find in American politics are those people who are making themselves big champions of blacks, and yet who are fighting against the one school kind of schools that are offering a way out of poverty for millions of black kids.
Thomas, when I had you on right before the election, I asked you what you thought Trump versus Hillary, and you said, well, Hillary is a known disaster, Trump is a risk, you'll take the risk. How do you feel about Trump versus Biden?
Not that different, except I think Biden is a bigger risk than Hillary was.
Because?
Because, first of all, he's not as smart. And I think that the way things are poised, if he comes in and the Democrats take the Senate, I don't see anything getting better in this generation. I also believe that even though the country has weathered many bad things in the past, there is a point of no return. And I suspect that that's where we're going to be taken to. When I see people talking seriously about abolishing the police force, my gosh, I mean, insanity. And of course, the biggest losers, if they do that, will be the low-income minority communities where you already have these rising rates of murder as the police withdraw. And the police themselves, when they realize that there are politicians who will throw them to the wolves rather than confront loudmouths, they pull back. They're not going to go out there and risk their lives needlessly, knowing that the politicians will turn against them if there's any problem.
What do you think will happen in November?
Oh, politics is very tough to predict. I'm told that at one point there was someone who had a 19-point lead at this time.
Yeah, I think Dukakis did. I think at one point.
That's right.
Yeah.
They saw by luck Dukakis for what he was, a phony. And I think that if they see Biden for what he is, not only a phony but an incompetent one, then of course all of this can turn around. But there's so much hanging on this that if that doesn't happen, we are going to be in big trouble. It means that the Democrats will be able to appoint the next whatever number of Supreme Court justices turn up during their term. They have so many counterproductive policies out there that I'm not sure the country can recover from.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, if you would, at twitter.com/UNCKnowledge. Twitter.com/UNCKnowledge. Comment, ask questions, suggest guests. A fellow at the Hoover Institution, Dr. Thomas Sowell has taught economics, intellectual history, and social policy at such institutions as Cornell, Amherst, and UCLA. The author of more than a dozen books, Dr. Sowell has just published a collection of essays, Dismantling America. Tom, welcome.
Good to be here.
Segment 1, Decline and Fall. From Dismantling America, quote, "The collapse of a civilization is not just the replacement of rulers or institutions with new rulers and new institutions. It is the destruction of a whole way of life and the painful and sometimes pathetic attempts of rebuilding amid the ruins. Is that where America is headed? I believe it is." Close quote. Now, whatever troubles we have, it's still the richest, most powerful nation in the world. We're still fundamentally at peace. Some soldiers in Iraq, some soldiers in Afghanistan, some in Germany, some in South Korea, but relatively small wars by historical standards in Afghanistan and Iraq. How can you say such a thing?
Well, that description would also have fit the United States on December 6, 1941. So it's like the argument that was used when I used to question whether Social Security was fiscally sound. And I said, Social Security has never missed a payment. It's never been a day late or a dollar short. I said, that's always true right up to the moment of collapse.
Again, from Dismantling America. While the Obama administration is not the root cause of the ominous dangers that face this country at home and abroad, it is the embodiment, the personification, and the culmination of dangerous trends that began decades ago. How does the President of the United States embody dangerous trends? How do you see this man?
Oh my gosh. I see him as someone who all his life has been associated with and part of a group of people who fundamentally don't believe in the principles of this country. Not only people, the most obvious example, obviously, is Jeremiah Wright. People like Bill Ayers, whom he's tried to disavow. But people who fundamentally think that we're on the wrong track, we have the wrong principles, and we need to be changed, whether we want to be or not.
Tom, you mentioned Jeremiah Wright, his pastor at church in Chicago. You mentioned Bill Ayers, who was a former member of
the Weather Underground.
The Weather Underground,
group.
exactly. What about his formation, his intellectual formation at Columbia, Harvard Law School?
Well, as he himself says, he always sought out the most radical people. He worked as a community organizer. I don't think most people stop and think, what does a community organizer do? He doesn't organize a community.
It's not bake sales. It's not bake sales he's organizing.
No, he's not telling people in the community how to shop better and stuff like that. He is mobilizing all the resentments, organizing them in order to put them into a battle to get what they want from other people.
Now, you talk about Barack Obama as embodying dangerous trends, quote, that began decades ago.
Oh, yes.
When? This is during your lifetime, during your adult lifetime?
Yes, and perhaps even a little earlier. But I think what you see in the most clearly, I think, in the academic world, are people who don't think that this country is a great country. One example of colleague of mine who teaches at Harvard, after 9/11, put an American flag on his car. And his colleagues said, what is that for? When I visited Berkeley in the aftermath of 9/11, when there were flags everywhere, I did not see one flag on the Berkeley campus, on any of those expensive houses. When I was coming back from Berkeley, the first American flag I saw was in a low-income black neighborhood in Oakland. These are people who consider themselves citizens of the world, and that the rest of us are so lucky to have them here to change America, so that people like us don't have a voice. And of course, the whole way that Obama has operated with these enormous bills that no one has ever had time to read, that they rush through, when they're putting people in power who don't have to go through the confirmation process, so that we don't find out what they're like except if there's an expose on Fox News or someplace. His whole thing has been to circumvent the American public in order to put in things that they clearly don't want, as shown by the polls, as shown by this recent repudiation in Missouri.
All right, that's a question. Barack Obama won by about 7 percentage points. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest for a Democratic presidential candidate. Bill Clinton won by 8. FDR won by big. But he's in the top 3 Democratic finishers in the last 7 decades. Barack Obama is. So here's the question. You've described him. You've described the academic elites. To what extent the American people voted for him?
Yes.
To what extent do you see a corrosion of values among the American people themselves on the one hand? On the other hand, to what extent is there just a kind of creeping takeover by an elite that fails to share, that is opposed to the values that most Americans share?
There's both things, and I think part of the reason so many people voted for him was that what they got through the media was so filtered that they poo-pooed this man having been a member of a church run by a ranting racist, because they wanted to believe that he was going to be a unifier. Community organizers don't unify. they divide, they polarize. That's how they get what they want. I never thought of Acorn as a unifying force in American life. And this man is not. But of course, if they don't know that, then of course they may vote for it.
So it's the press, it's Barack Obama and the administration, it's the elites at academic institutions.
But it's not just a thing that happened now. Long before Barack Obama's name became known, there was this attitude, essentially repudiating the principles of the country. I mean, it started, I think, with Woodrow Wilson, who was the first president of the United States to openly say that the Constitution, needed to be superseded. And he didn't mean that there needed to be amendments to the Constitution, which anybody can be for, but that the courts should do this. In other words, to circumvent the public, the voting public, and put in the things that the judges think ought to be put in, irrespective of what the Constitution says.
Segment 2, Dismantling America. 2 quotations. The first comes from your book, Dismantling America. This segment is on marriage. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, you write, said that the life of the law has not been logic but experience. Vast numbers of laws have accumulated and evolved over the centuries based on experience with male-female unions. There is no reason why all those laws should be transferred willy-nilly to a different kind of union, one with neither the inherent tendency to produce children or the inherent asymmetries of relationships between people of different sexes. That's quotation 1. Here's quotation 2. U.S. District Judge Vaughn Walker, ruling in Perry versus Schwarzenegger on August 4th. Quote, gender no longer forms an essential part of marriage. Close quote. I just dropped that in your lap to see what you do with it, Dr. Sowell.
Well, the most important decision is always who makes the decision. And so the question is not what is the role of gender for this judge to decide, but since we are presumably still, for the moment at least, a self-governing nation, it's for the voting public to decide. And so the fact that he feels that way, that's wonderful. Let him vote that way in the privacy of the voting booth. But let him not say that this is now the law of the land just because he happens to think that way.
Tom, let me give you just another couple of quotations from Judge Vaughn Walker's ruling the other day. Judge Walker, the traditional understanding of marriage represents, quote, nothing more than an artifact of a foregone notion that men and women fulfill different roles in civic life. Close quote. That's an artifact.
Well, one might say that Judge Walker is an artifact of what goes on in academia and particularly in the law schools. But again, the question is, whose decision is that? Is that a judge is there to decide that the rest of us, what we believe is just not worth thinking about? Or is he there to carry out the laws that have been passed by the duly elected representatives?
Tom, you know that during this trial, he had a long fact-finding phase in which one sociologist and expert after another came in to testify about the roles of genders, the state of marriage in the 21st century, and so forth. You just brush all that aside?
No, none of that is a substitute for we the people, which is what the Constitution is about. Mm-hmm. Well, I could give you an impressive list of people who have said absurd things. In fact, if you were to make a list of all the absurd things said by brilliant people, it would be longer than the Encyclopedia Britannica.
All right. One more from Judge Walker here. Quote, the evidence shows conclusively that moral and religious views form the only basis for the belief that same-sex couples are different from opposite-sex couples. Close quote.
Well, it may be conclusive to him, but again, the question is, whose decision is it? Obviously, it's not conclusive to other people, or else the proposition that he was ruling on would never have passed.
And been passed with the votes of 7 million Californians,
yes,
by the way. All right. So let me ask you, just step back from that a little bit and ask you this question. How did we go in the space of a couple of decades, maybe 3, but I think probably closer to 2, from an America in which the notion of same-sex marriage was literally unthinkable? That is to say, it was in nobody's head, so outlandish that it never occurred to anyone. 2, a sitting federal judge, named to the federal bench, by the way, by George H.W. Bush, coming out with an opinion like this. What happened to the legal regime, to the to the mores?
This is why I say that Obama is really the culmination of a trend. He didn't do this by himself. That there was a notion out there, a set of notions really about the country, about what was right, and about who should make what decisions. Those notions were out there, before he ever became a public figure. But now that and I think what you saw was an erosion of the confidence in the country and the country's culture, its principles, and so forth. And all of this happened. And what is happening now is what was just an erosion, sort of almost uncoordinated and so on, to a deliberate attempt on his part to change the country in fundamental ways.
Now, you talked about Woodrow Wilson with a certain kind of rot setting in with Woodrow Wilson, the progressives, the sort of elitism. Woodrow Wilson, know far better than that non-entity James Madison who drafted the Constitution. Right. All right. But in more recent times that you and I can remember, we had Ronald Reagan, and the sense that somehow the country was coming back. Mm-hmm. How do we go from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama? How do you go from a reassertion of what seems to be fundamental faith in the country to a Judge Vaughn Walker? What happened in the space of just 2 or 3 decades?
Well, I think it started immediately with Reagan's successor, George H.W. Bush, no doubt a decent man, an honorable man, but one who disdained what he called this vision thing. In other words, that an overarching sense of principles that you'd be fighting for. To me, I think one of the moments that sort of gave a clue was when, during one of the presidential debates, when Bush was looking at his watch.
Right.
I can't imagine Ronald Reagan or any Democrat, for that matter, looking at his watch during a. I mean, Bush was, and I think the first moment that you saw a glimpse of this was when Bush first took office, Bush 41, and started talking about a kinder and gentler America. That it's kinder and gentler to tax the taxpayers in order to make it easier on people who've not lived up to their responsibilities. You see that right now carried to extremes in this administration, where people who never took out a $700,000 loan in their lives now have to subsidize people who did take out a $700,000 mortgage loan.
No, I'm going to cut that off, but I'm going to share the link in the description also. That video. All right. Welcome, Information Man. Donnie's goes in, and beautiful Anna, and all others out in the cloud there. Welcome, welcome. Let's stop this and put it back on my other screen. Okay. Now it is late at night, and I think I might shut it down, but let me go on and share this little saying here that came to my mind. Let's see if I can find this one.
Everybody needs somebody to depend on, somebody to be there for you when things are going rough in life. I like to be the one that when the whole world is falling on you, I want to be the one you could turn to. I'd like to be the one on a cold winter's night who would wine and dine you by the fireplace and the candlelight. And to sweet music, we'll make love again and again. Girl, most of all, I just wanna be the one that holds you when you're feeling sad, the one that makes you smile when you're feeling bad. Girl, it is what it is. We don't have to pretend. Girl, I just wanna be the one that holds you when you're feeling sad, the one that makes you smile when you're feeling bad. Girl, it is what it is. We don't have to pretend. Girl, I just wanna be the one. Be a friend. Girl, let me be a friend. Oh, wanna stick by you through thick and thin. Let me be the one you call on. Swear I'll never do you wrong. I'll never do you wrong. I just wanna be there for you when you need someone.
Yes.
I wanna be the one when the morning comes. You wake up and you look at me and you'll say you had so much fun. And maybe, baby, you'll say to me, let's do it again. I guarantee we'll have a good time because you are my friend. I wanna be the one that holds you when you're feeling sad, the one to make you smile when you're feeling bad. It is what it is. We don't have to pretend.